InDesign has ways in which we can transform objects. So a transformation, or to transform something, is just a term used to describe the act of either moving, scaling, skewing, or rotating an object. So we have, again, many ways to do this type of an option, just like many of the other Adobe products. So to transform, we can move or relocate, we can scale, skew, or rotate. So I'm going to show you by opening the transform panel. And to find the transform panel, you'll see in this list under the window menu that it's not listed directly right there. We need to go under Object and Layout to find the transform panel. So when I open the transform panel, you'll see some areas here that we can show the transformations. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a box on my page, and I'll just extend it. I have some guides here set up for columns, but you'll see kind of with this box here. I'll go ahead and give it a fill, and to fill it, we have more to come on that in the coming lessons, but just wanted to share, it's very similar to Illustrator. So again, if I look at the transform panel here, we have an X and a Y, which is our horizontal page location on the page, and Y is the vertical location on the page. We have our W and H, width and height. And then we have some things down here that we can link them, constrain the proportions for them. So we have some scaling, some rotatings, and some skews. Now remember that by default, the 0 point is at the top left corner of our page. So our 0 point is in the top left up here. So when we're talking about X and Y locations, it's coming from this top left corner. So when we have a transformation, we have this this grid area here with 9 dots. And those 9 dots are the reference points. So clicking on a reference point displays the information for that point. And I want you to notice that when I'm clicking it here on the transform panel, it's also showing up here in the control panel. Remember, this is sort of our they call it InDesign super panel. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we have the exact same information up here in the top left as we do here in the transform panel. And you may notice that some of these other options look identical to what we have in the transform panel as well. So to transform objects, I certainly can use my transform panel here to enter in information. So again, I find that under my window menu, window, object and layout, and transform. I also can use my control panel, and that's the window menu and then control, and it's checked because it is visible, and typically you're going to have it visible right up here at the top, right underneath your menu. The next way that we can do a transformation, if I have my object selected, is under the object menu. We actually have transform here, so we can go ahead and apply one of these transformations. So say I did want to scale this. When I click on a menu item, I'm able to get my percentages, and of course I can preview this. So say I want to make this 90%, constraining my proportions, it reduces it 90%. Okay, so those are different ways that I can apply or transform objects. Now the point of the transformation always happens in reference to what reference point I have selected. So whichever reference point is selected determines the point of origin for the transformation. So if I have this top left corner selected and say I do a rotate here, you can see it rotates among that point. If I undo that, Control Z, and now let's do the bottom corner and again do a rotation. This time I'll do a negative. So you can see how there it moves again in that corner. Okay, so that's where you have to watch what you have selected, and you can change that either here in the control panel or in the transform panel. We do have a transform again, so let me make the center point be my point of origin, and I'll rotate this. Let's do a 30 degrees. So there it rotated 30 degrees. Now if I wanted to, I can go under my object and do a transform again. Transform again is the same as what happens in the Illustrator. Let's do this one more time. I'm going to do, I'll do a transformation here, and we'll do a rotate. And I'll preview this, and I'll rotate it 45 degrees. And I'll click copy. So now I've made a copy. So now if I do a transform again, you can see how it did that transformation one more time, keeping my point of reference the center because that's what I had initially selected. So those are ways that we can do transformations, very similar to Illustrator if you're familiar with that program. The control panel up here, like I said, is sort of InDesign super panel. It's the most often used panel in InDesign. You'll see that as I have an object selected, I see a lot of items dealing with just my frame or my object. So they call that, it's context sensitive. It changes based on the type of object that is selected. So when I have this object, it's very, very, very similar to my transform. If I were to make a text box here, and I'll just click and drag with my type tool to create a text box, now I see a lot of type related options up here, things like font and size, and on down to some of my kerning and tracking, alignments. So it's kind of pulling pieces from both my character and my paragraph panel. One last tool that we haven't really talked about yet, and it's the line tool. So the line tool basically is a tool that allows us to draw straight lines, vertical, horizontal, or in a diagonal, and that's if we hold down the shift key, or we can drag it in any amounts that we want. So the line tool is very handy. Remember, it goes off of the stroke. So right now I have a stroke of none. It's not going to do anything. The fills are not very visible because it's dealing with a line. So there you go. There's some important information on transformations, and then just paying attention to this control panel up here because it pretty much has everything that you need when you're doing your day-to-day tasks in InDesign.